Okay, my name is Ebstie. I was a PhD student at the University of Camerino. So I'm going to present you part of my thesis, which is focused on the malaria protocol for the characterizing the transmission blocking benefit of anti-malarials with the artemisinins. So I'm not going to say the details about the history of the Plasmodium because it's already known. But when we focus on the anti-malarial drugs which are targeting at different sites, we classify it either which are acting on the asexual blood stages like artemisinin, which are targeted for the treatment or the curing of clinical symptoms, or some of the drugs are targeting on the gametocyte killing effects like artemisinin and primaquine, and the early sporogonic stages. Some drugs are acting on the early sporogonic stages, which are either acting on the human being as well as with cancer parts or have long life cycles, or then they will act in the early sporogonic stage of the mosquito vectors. So when it comes to the development of the protocol, we call it the double transmission blocking effect using the direct feeding assay. For the sake of introduction, we know that most of the artemisinins are really effective on the asexual blood stage plus early gametocyte stages, but most of them are not really effective on the late stage or mature stage of gametocytes. So we need additional compounds which can target either the mature stage of gametocytes or which can be active in the early sporogonic stage of the parasite, which is in the mosquito stage, in the midgut of the mosquitoes. So the protocol is actually using the Plasmodium berghei, the mice, and the Anaphylaxis stephensii. And we applied the direct feeding assay of the in vivo experiment. So before we develop the protocol, first we have to see the nature of the artemisinins in the Plasmodium berghei mice model. So when we optimize, either we have to use the time points of administration, at which time shall we give the compound for the mice, which can able to block the development in the midguts of the Anaphylaxis stephensii. Once we got this, we have to determine the IC50 or the suboptimal dose range. Then, once we optimize the suboptimal dosage, we have to combine together between the artemisinin plus our compounds. So this is medicine materials, or the protocol we followed actually. We have the mice which are inoculated or infected with the Plasmodium berghei, which is a common species. So after the inoculation of the parasite in the mice, we have to wait until day 4 to have the mature gametocyte stage, which can infect the mosquitoes and develop to the early sporogonic stage, and then sporozoites at the end. Then we give a different dosage of the artemisinin at different days, IP, intraperitoneal administration, and then we do have the first one, the day 2, which was categorized under group 1, given artemisinin at 50 mg per kg, which was 24 hours before mosquito infection. The other group was those mice which are treated with artemisinin at 50 mg per kg, but it was 10 hours before mosquito infection. The group 3 and group 4 were respectively given artemisinin at 50 mg per kg, and the solvents which was applied for the preparation of artemisinin, but both groups were treated with the respective response by 0.5 hours before mosquito infection. Then, as we can see from the graph, the vertical line is the density of the oocytes at day 6 of the mosquito infection. Each dots represent the midgut of the mosquitoes, plus the oocytes is actually the positive oocytes. So artemisinin given at 50 mg per kg at 24 hours before mosquito infection, as we can see, has low numbers of oocytes density with respect to the 30 minutes before mosquito infection plus solvent groups. whereas when artemisinin given 10 hours before mosquito infection, it was comparably equalized or have an effectiveness versus 24 hours before mosquito infection. So we know that at 24 hours before mosquito infection, artemisinin has an effect on the asexual stage plus early gametocytes, whereas at 10 hours before mosquito infection means more or less is at day 4 where mature gametocytes were happened. So the activity was great at this point, which is close to acting the mature gametocytes, close to acting. In the B scatter graph, artemisinin was given at different dosage plus time points. So as we can see, in the B represents artemisinin at 50 mg per kg 10 hours before mosquito infection was great, as we proved it from the previous experiment. But artemisinin at 0.5 hours or 30 minutes before mosquito infection was not really achievable in terms of blocking the transmission of the parasite. The dosage also was not a factor for contributing artemisinin as the transmission blocking following the same protocol of artemisinin, we also determine artesunate for the transmission blocking effect because at 35 mg per kg. So we know that from the practical point of view, artesunate was also effective in terms of the transmission blocking effect. So unlike artemisinin, artesunate was great or having the blocking effect even when it was given 30 minutes before mosquito infection. Of course, 10 hours before mosquito infection was also great. So once we determine the time points, we also did experiments to magnify or to show the dose ranges of the artemisinin, artesunate, and nimazal. In our lab at the University of Camerino, we know nimazal has the standardized effect of transmission blocking effect, which when it was given 1 hour before mosquito infection. So the red lines, the red texts indicate the IC50 versus the lines. All right. So once we determine the IC50 dose range and the time points versus the dosage, we combined the more or less the gametocidal artemisinins, because we know that artemisinins have an effect on the early asexual stage versus early gametocytes. So we consider artemisinin as the gametocidal agents. So we determine the time points, we determine the dose range, and then we have to combine with the sporocidal agents. We know the nimazal is a derivative of Azadirachta indica materials, which was extracted from the fruit as ripe or unripe fruits. So we know the dose range, we know the time administration, and then we have to combine together. So artemisinin was given 10 hours before mosquito infection, and then after 9 hours of artemisinin administration, we also give sporocidal nimazal materials 1 hour just before mosquito infection, and then we determine the dose, the density of those items, the prevalence. So to see the effect of the combination between artemisinin at 35 versus nimazal 40 mg per kg, we followed the high single agent analysis, which was considered as the analysis for combination effect of the two compounds. And then the graphs represent the oocyte reduction in percent versus the treatments. So the first graph represents the combination of artemisinin 35 versus nimazal at 40. So as we can see, the reduction was higher than 90%, of course. At artemisinin at 35 mg, more or less it was 40% reduction in terms of oocyte density. Nimazal, as we can see, it's more than 80%, which was really high activity in comparison with the single agent versus the combination effects. So the combination index, the index which is represented, the division between the combination effect versus the high single agent. In this case, the high single agent was nimazal at 40 mg per kg. So to say it's have a combination effect or not, we have to follow also the p-value rules. So if the p-value was less than 0.05 and the combination was really operating each other. So in this case, the p-value was greater than 0.05, so the combination effects was not really appreciable or accepted for the reduction of the oxides density. So we have to reduce the dosage of the nimazole. No, this is a prevalence actually. So the prevalence nimazole was really effective in terms of reducing the positivity of the mosquitoes, which was the p-value was really less than effective. So in our first experiment, nimazole at 40 milligram per kg was not really appreciable for the combination of the nimazole versus artemisinin at 5 milligram per kg. So we have to reduce the dose of the two components. Then we got finally the p-value which was less than 0.05. So it was cooperative in terms of oxides density, whereas the low in the dosage of the two was not really appreciable for reduction in terms of balance. With the same principle, we use artesunate versus nimazole at different combinations or at different milligram per kg. So when we see in the experiment 1, artesunate was given at 25 milligram per kg and combined with the nimazole at 35 milligram per kg. But in terms of oxides density, we got the p-value which was less than 0.49, and the combination index was 0.9, which was really good. But because the p-value was not really effective, so the combination of the two compounds were not really appreciable. Of course, in terms of prevalence, there was no activity shown here also. But in experiment 2, when the dosage was reduced by 5 milligram per kg with the constant amount of nimazole at 35 milligram per kg, and the combination index was more or less 0.5, and the p-value was also at the border of the decision, but we finally decide artesunate versus nimazole was not really effective in terms of the cooperative. So the high single agent analysis in terms of nimazole versus artesunate or artemisinin, it was not really appreciable. Of course, the experiments were not really dependent on the protocol development, but also we go down in the phase and fraction levels. We measure the cytotoxicity and also the validation with the field experiment at the Burkina Faso. So this was our one specific objective analysis. Thank you very much for your attention.